Welcome everyone to another episode of Pop Rant Radio, the podcast where two pop culture junkies discuss popular and sometimes not so popular culture. My name is Moss, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is my good friend and co-host, Eric. How are you today, sir?
Good. I sit here on the edge of my seat every time I'm like, I'm going to say something. Here it comes.
Something clever.
Right, and then I always don't. I would just go, good. How are you?
So we just got back from seeing Warcraft, the movie.
Yep.
Oh man, that's what we're going to talk about today.
It's already getting pushed out of theaters.
So we're going to talk about Warcraft, and then we're going to kind of dovetail that into a discussion of world building and setting up universes and worlds that movies take place in.
Right.
And go from there.
Well, and I didn't even notice this until I got in the car. In honor of Warcraft, I am wearing a David Bowie shirt.
Ah.
For those of you who don't know, Warcraft is written and directed by Duncan Jones, who is the son of David Bowie.
Yes.
Whose name is David Jones. But he changed it because he didn't want to be David Jones. Because of the monkeys.
And did he want to have a locker in the sea?
If only. Then he changed his name. I can't remember the guy's name, but he changed his name to the guy that wrote "It's Not Unusual."
It's not unusual to be loved by anyone.
He changed his name to that, and then that guy released the album like the same week, and he was like, "Ah, fuck!" And he changed it to David Bowie.
Nice.
And then he changed the world.
Yes, he did.
Duncan Jones didn't.
He changed our world for 2 hours. All right, so, and up top, spoilers, I guess, for this movie.
No one cares.
A lot of people care, trust me. There's not a whole lot you can spoil about this movie. Like, I guess people that are really invested in Warcraft probably already know the basic outline of this story.
Right.
And up front, Eric and I have a passing familiarity with Warcraft.
Yeah.
I've played Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 3 and briefly played World of Warcraft. I have a total of 5 hours clocked in on that game years ago.
Now, I played Warcraft 3 when I was in middle school, and I played World of Warcraft, I think about I don't remember if it was like a year or two after it like really started to gain ground.
Mm-hmm.
Then I played the first expansion, Burning Crusade. I stopped right before Lich King came out.
Gotcha.
Mostly because I didn't have an income, and I couldn't pay like the $15 a month, so not my choice to have it cut.
Sure.
But I have a general knowledge of like the Horde and the Alliance and their constant bouting. I know some of the lore, but not enough to be credited on.
Yeah, I know a little bit. I have a couple really good friends who are really into World of Warcraft and are very familiar with the lore, and so I've talked to them about the storylines and that sort of thing. So again, kind of a passing familiarity with what's going on.
Right.
Kind of like you, like I'm familiar with the Horde and the Alliance and how the portal was opened up, right, and how the orcs came through and that sort of thing.
I will say there is a very weird misrepresentation where, like, in the Alliance you see a lot of different races, and the Horde you just have orcs. I mean, I know they didn't want to shove stuff in, but I was
more than they did already.
Right. I was kind of expecting at some point to maybe see like a Tauren or a Troll or something, because, and to be perfectly fair, the Alliance doesn't dwell on the other creatures. I mean, the stupid elves show up in one scene, say two things, and then walk off set.
Right. For the most part, this is the humans versus orcs movie.
Yeah. And there's dwarves.
And
I laughed every time it cut to that stupid dwarf.
So overall, like our general impressions, neither one of us really liked the movie,
No.
I would say. It wasn't very good. I don't think I disliked it quite as much as you did.
Yeah, I disliked it, I think, quite a bit more
Okay.
than you did.
So my general impression of the movie, as far as the special effects go, clearly all the orcs are computer generated.
Right.
The dwarves are computer generated. Most of the environments are computer generated. I don't think it's a great choice, but I accepted the fact that, okay, this film has this visual style, and if you don't accept that, you're just not going to get anywhere with it.
Right.
So I was kind of on board, quote unquote, for the style that they had chosen.
And for the potential of it paying off.
Right.
That is something I was okay with too. I thought that the orcs were well enough designed that you could distinguish between them.
I agree.
It wasn't like the Transformers movies, like the first 2 or 3,
where
it was really hard to see who was who.
Yeah, they're just completely indistinguishable.
Which was great. There was a couple times where they looked a little bad, and I brought up the fact that there was even a couple times where their lip synced wasn't on, or even like the sound of like their collisions was off, which kind of threw me off a little bit. But for the most part, they looked good. Their emotions were pretty good. I don't know if they mocapped this. I don't know if they did or didn't. I would probably say they didn't. I might be wrong, but
I'm sure
willing to walk on that
they did
ledge.
like facial motion capture.
And see, that's what I don't know if they did, because the facial stuff looked very cartoony to me at a lot of points.
Yeah, and again, like I said, it's the film definitely has a style, and if you don't accept the style, like you're just not going to get anywhere with this movie whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, I guess I'm on board for this right from the get go, and we'll go
Yeah.
from there. Special effects wise, like it's fine. Again, you just kind of have to accept that you're watching this computer generated fantasy movie.
Right.
That's the ride that you're in for.
It looks worse than the opening cinematic to World of Warcraft, though. I will say that.
I'll take your word for it.
Like, I would have much rather seen this as like a full animated film and not like a half and half.
Sure.
I think that would have been a lot more prosperous than this weird half and half stuff.
Right, because there's definitely a stark contrast to the human characters versus the other characters in the movie.
Yeah.
And again, it kind of is the way that it is. Story-wise, it tells a pretty basic story. It's
kind of Pocahontas-esque.
Yeah, it's kind of like that's a good comparison. So there's the orcs who are primarily the bad guys, but there's a few orcs who they don't want to necessarily war against the humans. Like they figure out that the leader of the orcs, his magic, the fell magic, as we come to learn about it, the green magic.
Yeah, green light.
It destroys life. It like destroys nature and the environment. And they're like, well, we don't want to have anything to do with this. So they try to ally themselves with the humans who are basically just the good guys in this movie.
Which is total horseshit. Because if you were above the age of 15, you probably played the Horde in World of Warcraft. And anyone who plays the Horde knows that the Horde is like the underdog. They're the ones that are like, it's kind of like a racism thing where the allies hate the Horde because they're not human or elf or dwarf. Taurens, they're half bull. They look like crap. Trolls, they look super weird. Get them out of here. No one sides with the Alliance when they like become of age.
And I think that there's a potential to tell an interesting story about two sides of a war, and neither one of them are necessarily correct.
Right.
But the movie, or you could do it that way, or you could very much have like a Lord of the Rings where we're clearly rooting for the good guys and the orcs are clearly the bad guys.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of complications in there with like Boromir, wanting the Ring of Power. But ultimately, he just wants the Ring of Power to fight against Sauron, the bad guys, and the orcs.
Plus, he's man, which they specifically state in the film. Man is the weakest of the races. They were the ones that were consumed by the power the most. So it would make sense for him to see it. And like you said, his desire is a good desire, but it's a desire nonetheless.
Right. Whereas in this movie, they kind of want their cake and eat it too. They have the good guys, they have the bad guys, and then they have the guys and the orcs who aren't necessarily bad. They kind of want to change their ways, but the movie just doesn't really do a very good job of, I guess, managing that.
No.
And the biggest problem, I think, is that with a couple of exceptions, I would argue that the main orc that we follow, who is
Duracell.
Duratan.
Yes.
Duratan the orc. Besides him and maybe the Gore,
his friend.
No, the half female, half orc, or half human, half orc.
Corona, 9 Coronas.
Gorona, 9 Coronas. Gorona. Besides those two characters, everyone in this movie has one personality trait. Right. Like nobody has any character development. Like the king is the king, and the Lothar, the main character, he's kind of just like he's a ripoff of Aragorn. But he's
no charisma.
Right. And again, and I want to say this up top, passing familiarity between Eric and I as far as the games go. I know that Lothar is a character in the games, and he's kind of like this legendary figure, and that's fine. But just from a movie watching standpoint, there has to be some sort of entry point where we as the audience who aren't familiar with the games can be engaged in the characters and what's going on in the film.
Right.
And Lothar as a character is just completely uninteresting.
Yeah. Well, like you're drawing a comparison to Aragorn, which is, I think, very fair because that is clearly who they're basing it off of. Aragorn, his introduction is he's a complete badass. He hides the hobbits because he knows that, the Death Riders are coming to get him, takes them out, and he starts to run with them. He's trying to get them out of there. Then we're introduced to his whole backstory with, the elves and how he falls in love with Arwen. I was going to say Liv Tyler. I was just going to cut it right there. And there's this kind of like a forbidden love because of her dad, L. Ron Hubbard. And it's just
Ron Hubbard.
It's just this big problem. But we know who he is. Like, we know his passion.
Right, and we
And then
also...
it wasn't until later on that they reveal that he's the heir. Like, that's not his character.
Right, and we get a little bit in the first movie where specifically we figure out that he is the heir of Isildur, and Isildur is, of course, the guy who could have destroyed the ring but chose not to.
Right.
Aragorn feels that he has the same weakness of Isildur's blood inside of his own, and feels that he's not necessarily worthy to take up the mantle of being king. We get a lot of backstory about him, again, even in the first movie.
Yeah.
And The Lord of the Rings has an advantage because it was planned as a trilogy from the onset. The Lord of the Rings is obviously a very famous book trilogy, so audiences kind of know, hey, there's going to be multiple parts to this.
Right.
But we still get, at first he's Strider, and then we figure out, oh, he's Aragorn, son of Arathorn. And he's kind of this mysterious character, but we do get his backstory. And we do get him falling in love with Arwen, and we learn why him falling in love with an elf is slightly forbidden and why Elrond looks down upon that. And we get a lot of context clues as to what makes Aragorn interesting. And by contrast, in this movie, Lothar we basically learn he's a good fighter.
Yep.
He has a son. Which
does he?
The exposition on that is
the exposition on the whole damn scene is terrible. Hello, son. You should watch your tongue. You're speaking to the queen. I'm also speaking to my sister. Like, no one would talk like this.
It's real rough. And right from the get-go, again, spoilers, when we're introduced to his son, if you're even remotely an intelligent movie watcher, someone who's seen movies before, the way that it's set up is like, well, clearly his son's going to die.
I mean, if you've seen 300, it's the same damn story as 300. It's a soldier whose son is like, he wants to be a soldier, he wants to live up to his dad's promise, and he, kind of sneaked. It's weird. That's something that kind of bothered me too. His son's injured at some point, and like right before his son, spoiler, dies, he's like, "You're injured, you can't go with us." Cut to the next scene. He's on a horse just right there with
he's just
them.
there, yeah.
Like, why is he's injured?
And I think that's another big thing, too. This movie definitely feels like it's been cut down.
Yeah.
It feels maybe like it was originally a 3-hour movie, and it's been cut down to 2 hours.
Don't you give me an extended cut.
I don't want it either. But, yeah, that's a really good point. His son is injured, and he's like, go ahead, stay here and rest. And in the very next scene, he's with them on horseback. It's like, oh, okay. And there's a lot of that going on. You and I were talking about how there's a lot of really awkward editing in the movie.
There's a lot of Christopher Nolan cuts.
Yeah, where it feels like someone's in the middle of their dialogue or in the middle of emoting, and then the scene cuts or it fades. And it's very, very choppy. We talked about this a few weeks ago, specifically about the Every Frame Painting video where they show, Luke Skywalker lifting the X-Wing out of the Dagobah swamp.
Like you're doing again.
Yes, and and how that scene takes its time and the audience is given some time to, kind of feel the emotion with the character. And that's just basically entirely absent from this movie.
Yeah.
This movie, from the get-go, is moving at, 100 miles an hour, and it very rarely has time to breathe. I would argue there's a couple times, like with Duratan, the orc, and his orc buddy, I don't remember his name, where they're talking about, remember, our home, and like, it's good to see trees again. And that's kind of a quiet moment. And there's maybe 2 or 3 of those in the movie where things settle down a little bit and we kind of get this character piece. But overall, everyone in the movie just has one personality trait.
Right.
And that's it.
It's not even that it's like an action-packed movie where it's back to Michael Bay idea where every scene is like a fight. There's not a lot of fighting in this movie.
Yeah, overall, there really isn't.
There's just a lot of like stupid exposition and conversations about stuff that either doesn't matter or is just beating you over the head with it, where it's like, the Guardian, blah, 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 the Guardian, we need the Guardian, here's the Guardian.
Yeah, it seemed like we needed access to more information than we got. Like you said, the Guardian, we're told about there's this Guardian, and he's supposed to show up when things are bad.
Right.
And then we get introduced to him, played by Ben Foster, horribly miscast.
Yeah. Because
Ben Foster is in his like early 30s maybe, and
they make him look like he's probably 40.
Yeah, but his character is Medivh, the Guardian, who's basically this wizard sorcerer guy.
He's Gandalf.
He's very much like a Gandalf type character, but he's a little more ominous, maybe more like Saruman type of thing.
Right, or Sidious.
But he's kind of played up to be this like wise, aged character. And he looks like he's 35.
Yeah.
And it's just really hard to buy. And that's another thing as far as I feel like there's a couple times here where it feels like everyone's kind of playing dress up.
Yeah.
It doesn't, the world, like all of the sets look like sets. And I don't know if they're all computer generated or they've just designed that way. And I understand that they're trying to take the visual aesthetic from the games, like with the armor and the weapons and the flag banners
And
and
the
all that
mounts and
stuff.
everything.
Yeah, and there's the Lothar rides a griffin in the
Right, which is
movie.
very World of Warcraft-esque.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I get all that, but everything just kind of looks fake when it comes to the sets.
Yeah.
And a lot of like the guy who plays the younger wizard, Katgar, I think is his name.
That sounds like a bad like Thundercats.
Yeah, I think it's Katgar. He, especially at the very beginning, gets a little bit better, but it just seems like he's in a children's play.
Yeah. He looks like he's in like a Shakespeare in the Park costume.
And it's very hard for any actor to kind of deliver dialogue where they're talking about, oh, I've got to cast this magic spell, or oh, we've got to go, whatever. And it's a little rough. But I think Ben Foster is the biggest miscast in the movie.
Well, our introduction to Katgar was kind of, I think it was like the big thing for me where I was like, okay, this is not going to be good. Is they're like, we have this guy, he's been examining the dead bodies. Okay, where is he? Here he is. All right. They like talk for like 5 seconds. And he's like, I need to examine your dead. So he goes and he examines the dead, and he's like, all right, hold on. Shoves his hand in the dead guy's mouth, pulls out green mist, and they're like, oh. He's like, get the Guardian. No one gets the Guardian. All right, cut. Go to the King. And then it's just like,
again, yeah,
stop.
It's moving at 100 miles an hour right off the get-go, and we're being introduced to the world of Azeroth, which is the world that the movie takes place in.
Right.
At the very, very beginning of the movie, we get the narration from Duratan, who, spoilers, he dies at the end.
Right.
But he's narrating the story, and he narrates the story after he's dead.
Yeah.
It's an odd choice.
It reminds me of, because it's really funny in the movie Kick-Ass, when Kick-Ass is like, yeah, I bet you're asking yourself, if I'm about to die right here, how am I narrating the story? And to that I say, don't be such a smart ass. And it's like, that's funny. Like, it's a joke.
Again, the movie's just moving at 100 miles an hour, and at the very beginning, we get introduced to the orcs, and, we get introduced to, like, random human and random orc.
Which serve no purpose.
Yeah, it's just kind of like the cold open, and then it's like Ironforge, the dwarf city, and we get introduced to Lothar and the dwarf.
Which I laughed at immediately.
He's CG. Again, I just kind of accepted it. He's all CG.
He looks like ass. Like he's terrible.
And we get introduced to Lothar there, and then we're there for 15 seconds.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, now we're going to Stormwind, the city. And you had mentioned this right after we watched the movie, where there's a lot of establishing shots of, here's another city.
And it looks the same as every damn city we see.
There's like the floating city, and down to, again, just kind of being all over the place. Katgar, he is a wizard, but he's been expelled from his order.
Right.
Which I don't remember the name of that.
I thought that was what the Guardian was.
Maybe.
At first, because they kind of talked about that, but then it's revealed later on, no, he was like part of like this mage college.
Right, which we don't see until
to?
Towards the end of the movie. Yeah, it's
He was like, I was sold at the age of 6. What?
But going back to what you said, like our introduction to him, Lothar goes into like the cell where Katgar's being held. This is the first time we see Katgar.
Right.
And like Lothar grabs him and like shoves him into the table and is like, he called him a spell chucker, which I like that. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
And he like holds him out and is like, what are you doing, spell chucker? And we're like, who is this person? Right. We have no idea what's going on. Oh, he's like, oh, I'm Katgar. I'm investigating the dead body. Yeah, we have to go talk to the Guardian. Well, the Guardian hasn't been around in 6 years. Well, let's go talk to the King. And the King's like, yep, go talk to the Guardian. So many characters, so fast. Yeah. And we get to the Guardian, and the Guardian's like, oh, okay, it must be fell magic. This is bad. We have to go investigate this. And then, I know we're jumping around, but spoilers, the Guardian ends up being the bad guy at the end.
Yeah.
The Guardian had fell magic take control of him, and
which they even
he's
freaking
the one,
say it.
He's the one who opened the portal to let the orcs in.
They say it like really early on in the movie. They're like, isn't it weird that the Guardian said to do this and he's the only one that would know it? Yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah, and then he gets mad that the Katgar took the book from his library.
He's like studying like the portal and everything.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. And then when it's finally revealed that the Guardian is the bad guy, quote unquote, he's like, the fell magic took control of my mind. I don't even remember what I actually did. And I was like, well, that's super convenient because
Right.
the movie gives you, the story of the movie gives you no reason why the Guardian would let the orcs through.
Yeah.
Like, they could have come up with something where it was like, the war has to happen because of destiny. Like,
Or
that's
even that-
that's
or that, like-
garbage, but that would have been better than nothing.
Or maybe it was that he like wanted to save them. Like
Yeah.
the world is dying. I needed to give them a place to live. They don't say it.
literally anything. Like
Because
that,
even while he's while he's dying, he says, "All I wanted to do was help everyone." By letting the orcs in, like, explain that. How is that
Right.
helping everyone?
it would have made sense, like you said, if he was like, I needed to save the orcs. The orcs would have died. I needed to give them a way to get into our world.
Right.
Not even that.
No.
His motivation literally boils down to like the fell magic corrupted me so much that I don't remember what I did.
It was essentially, it made me do it.
Right.
It made me do all the bad stuff.
That's it.
Yep.
We get nothing.
And even like there's an evil orc too named Colgate or whatever.
Colgate Crest.
Yeah,
Crest whitening
Crest,
strips.
That's what it is. Yep.
It's Gul'dan.
Gul'dan, yeah.
It's like Goldar from
Yeah.
Power Rangers, but I think it's Gul'dan, yeah.
There were several parts of that movie where I completely forgot about Gul'dan, especially when they were like the Guardians, the bad guy. I was like, oh, okay, and then they come back to Gul'dan. I was like, oh, I thought he was dead.
Well, and then at the final battle, when the humans roll up and they're like, okay, we have to... Their whole goal was to get Gul'dan, and then they get there and they're like, let's fight literally everyone except Gul'dan.
Right. Let's not go for him.
It's just...
It's garbage.
And so, obviously we did not like this movie, but there was a couple really cool parts, I think.
Yeah, especially in the ending bits, in that big fight scene. There's
Yes.
a lot of like good key moments in there.
Yeah, I really like when Duratan... Basically, he decides, I have to show the rest of the orcs, show the horde, Gul'dan is using this magic for evil.
Right.
So he challenges him to like a
And he's not a
one-on-one
true
fight.
orc.
Yeah, he's not a true orc. He challenges him to a one-on-one fight, and they have like their code of honor whenever the main chieftain is challenged or whatever, like they
It has
have
be
to
like a fist
fight.
yeah.
Yes. And so during the fight, Gul'dan uses his magic to kill Duratan, and all of the other orcs are like, he cheated.
Right.
One, you even pointed out, one of them was like, shame
Yeah, I
on
was like,
you!
Gul'dan's grandma was in the audience like, shame on you, Gul'dan!
Like wagging fingers.
Right.
That part was cool. Duratan sacrifices himself to show the rest of the horde, hey, you shouldn't be following this guy.
Right.
And then at first, all the orcs are like, oh, we're not gonna follow you. And then
Then he kills like
kills three of them, and they're like, oh no, we're with you, we're good. There's
like stupid.
thousands of them. It's like just dogpile his ass.
Right. Or when the humans show up, lay down your arms and just be like, go for it.
Yeah.
Get him. He's the bad guy.
It was a really powerful moment where he's showing, hey, this guy is not what he claims to be, and then it's just kind of immediately sacrificed. It was rough.
Right. So, now we've kind of got through the plot, basically.
Well, okay. Are there any other good things? I have one more good thing. But go
I
ahead.
kind of have a good thing, too.
One other thing I really liked in this movie was, at the very end, there's a half-orc lady,
Garona.
Garona, man, everybody's gonna hate us for names in this podcast. It's fine. So Garona is half human, half orc.
We think. They never really say it. They just say she's a halfling.
She's half orc. It's
Yeah.
assumed that she's half human, half orc. But anyway,
Maybe she's half a Asari, because they show like a weird Asari creature in the beginning.
I'll take your word for it. So
Asari's
She-
Mass Effect.
that's funny. She's working with the humans because she believes that Duratan wants peace, wants to overthrow Gul'dan,
Right.
and wants to save the orc world, blah, blah, blah. So she's working with the humans, and at the very end, the human king, who apparently has to lead the army, I guess.
Right, in his Power Rangers helmet.
His helmet was terrible.
His helmet was like a tiger head.
Oh, it's really bad, but there was that one shot in particular where it's like sitting really poorly on his head, and he's like talking through it, and you and I looked at each other and we were like,
That looks
that
terrible.
looks awful.
It looked like it looked like a Power Rangers helmet.
It
It's
was-
literally like it's a tiger with its mouth open, and like he's like peering through like between like the teeth.
Yes.
Like that's what the helmet looks like.
It looks
garbage.
It looks super bad. So anyway, the shit's going down. The humans are the king and a few humans are left, along with half orc lady,
Right.
and the orc chieftain is rolling up and is gonna kill the king
Right,
because
and
he
then,
wants the honor of killing the king.
and then somehow through magic, they slow down time around them, yet they're still talking
Right,
in full
they
real
have a
time
moment to stop and talk to each other while the battle is raging on.
in slow motion.
And the king is like, you need to kill me because if you kill me, then they'll let you live and you can live on and try to establish peace between humans and orcs at a later day.
Right.
There's no need for both of us to die. And very regrettably, she does it. She stabs him because that's the only option that she has. And I was like, that's a really cool idea. That's a really cool concept. I don't really care because I don't know anything about the king other than he's the king and he has a wife and 2 kids.
Right.
And outside of that, he has no other personality traits. I don't even remember his name, to be honest with you. Doesn't matter.
Tang.
I
think it was Tana or something.
It doesn't matter. Anyway, that was a cool idea. Like, he has to sacrifice himself so she can live on. Unfortunately, it's just couched in all of this other stuff that I just couldn't give 2 shits about.
Right. And for me, another thing that I kind of like is there's a moment later on in that scene when Lothar, whatever his name is, shows up and he gets the king's body. And after this fight that he does this guy, he kind of flies off and he makes eye contact with Corona. And it's like this kind of emotional scene. And then it just ends.
Yeah.
And it just there's no conversation between the 2 of them. There's nothing more to it. It's just this eye contact.
Right. It's not like a nod, like I understand, or right. And then of course at the end we figure out, or he finds the dagger that was in the king's neck,
right,
and realizes, oh, it was Gorona that killed him.
Right.
Now I hate her, even though we had a half-baked love interest that was just shoved in the movie and not supported at all.
You made out with me after my son died.
Right.
Which we both laughed at.
Yeah, it was just really weird.
She's like kissing his neck. He's like, I missed my son.
And again,
like,
it was that one scene where, because there's that scene where Ben Foster is talking to the half-orc lady,
mm-hmm.
and he tells a story about how if you're going to find love, it's worth traveling across the world or having traveled really far or whatever. And it's like, she's in love with him? Like, they've literally had 2 conversations.
See, I thought she was going to go with Ben Katgar. Whatever his name was.
Katgar.
Because they had like a little moment in the beginning, and it was like, that's cute. But it was gone.
Clearly, she was going after Lothar because he was a great
strong.
He was a great warrior, and she's attracted to that. But like, it was just so half baked.
Which I'm gonna get back to that because that's a huge issue that I have with this movie.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, but with the scene where they kind of look at each other and that whole thing, it reminded me of the ending to Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Okay.
The new remake one.
Mm-hmm.
However, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes does it so much better.
Yes.
There's a scene where, like, the main human character is talking to Caesar, who is he's kind of a higher up amongst the apes.
Yeah, he's the main ape that we follow.
Right. And they kind of just look at each other, and it just, like, the reality sinks in where it's like, we can't do this.
Right.
We've tried, but it's going to keep failing. And it's like this really emotional scene where they both kind of, like, they put their heads together, and it's like, I'm sorry, we tried our best. It's inevitable at this point.
Right.
We have to come back to this battlefield as enemies now.
Yeah, because the 2 of them understand each other, but the 2 of them also understand that both of their sides will never be able to cooperate with each other.
There's always going to be bad apples that ruin it for everyone.
Right.
And it's really, really well done in that movie. It's an emotional moment.
That's a really good bring-up, actually, because it's funny now that you say that. I didn't think about it. It's so crazy how much this movie parallels Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, I was seeing that the whole time.
It's actually just kind of the same movie.
Right. It's so much better done in that one. Real quick, I'm gonna get a little soapbox here. And I'm gonna talk about feminist issue with this movie because it pisses me off.
Okay.
So we were introduced in the beginning to, and I really, really like this because I was afraid they weren't gonna do it because a lot of like times when people talk about fantasy characters, they tend to make the creature like one gender, and it's very hard to do another gender of it. Most of the time, like World of Warcraft has been really good about that by showing there are male orcs and female orcs, male trolls, female trolls. It's really good. One of the early scenes we see Duracell with his wife, who's pregnant. Which, by the way, she loses that baby fat like immediately. I'd like to point out, and like I was like, oh, cool. It's an orc, it's an orc couple, and like She looks hideous, just like he looks hideous, and I
Yes.
loved it. But since we have to have the love interest, we can't have the love interest look bad. She's got to look hot, so we got to make her a halfling,
Right.
and she's really attractive and like
Half orc. Halfling
not
is
halfling,
different.
yeah.
Halfling is like hobbits.
And I was just like, I was sitting there the whole time in the movie going, well, why does she have to be an attractive orc? Why couldn't she have like the big buck teeth like they do? She has them, but they're kind of like cute little like vampire things you buy when you're
Right.
like a little kid. Why couldn't she be, a little bit uglier? And like they still be attracted for her character and not for her appearance, but that's just
there's no way that movie's gonna go this route.
No, they needed sex appeal.
Right. Well, it's not even that. I mean, agreed, but I don't even think it's that. It's just there's already so much ground they have to cover with making Warcraft a movie.
Right.
They don't need to try to solve the subtleties of the orc, a full orc looking lady with a human and like love. I mean, the love triangle is super half baked anyway.
Well, it just felt like a Hollywood thing. It felt like Hollywood was like,
again, you're gonna adapt Warcraft into a movie,
right?
Like, you have to take some shortcuts. You have to put some cliches in there.
It just bugged me like hardcore. The other thing that kind of bothered me was orcs had male and female warriors, but the humans didn't for the most part until like there was like one scene where there was one woman in armor, and I was like, oh, okay. Whatever.
Obligatory female warrior.
There she is. Look at her. She's the only one. But the armor was really cool. I know we talked about that a little bit beforehand. But you and I made fun of this one scene where Khadgar is like rescuing Luthor out of prison.
Yes.
And he's like, here's your armor. We have to go. And Luthor's like, okay. Walks off scene. Comes back. He's in like full armor.
Yeah.
This isn't like a little shirt he puts on. This is like chest plate, armor, shoulder plates.
Yeah. Like for
leggings.
If anyone listening knows anything about armor, plate mail, like in reality, it's very difficult to put it on by yourself at all, much less in 10 seconds.
Yeah, and that's being very generous that it's 10 seconds.
Super generous. We also you also wanted to mention how during the final battle between Lothar, Khadgar, and Ben Foster, Medivh, that Medivh is like choking Lothar. And then Khadgar distracts him.
Sends the spell at him.
Right, and he drops him, and he's like, and he turns.
He makes like a phase.
And so in the scene cuts for
back
like 10 seconds or whatever, and then it cuts back, and like Lothar and Khadgar are like hiding.
Right, and he's just like the Guardian just like looking around for him.
Right, like where did you go? And it's like
they're in a circular room, man.
It's
How did you lose them?
What? This doesn't make any sense.
It wasn't like a maze where they like ran around a corner and like ran around another corner. They're literally like in a circle, like almost like a cathedral room.
Right. With
like pillars. And I guess, they could hide behind the pillars.
Well, they hide behind the giant like golem. So there's like the one spot in the room they could hide. That's where they're hiding.
Guess where they're at.
And the Guardian's like, I want to know where you are.
Well, and the Guardian looked like the girl from The Ring. Towards the end, too, which really threw me off. He's got like really greasy, long black hair. His face is all crackly. I was like, did someone push him down a well? Is that why he's mad?
It was rough.
So... The number one worst thing about this movie, though, to me, that was infuriating to such a point. So when I was in college, I took filming classes here and there, and like I learned how to set up a shot, essentially. The DP of this film needs to be fired. He needs to be like taken out of Hollywood and like blacklisted. Okay? There are so many shots in this movie where the focal point of the shot is supposed to be close to the center. You can have them off to the side and give them room for their arms to move. That's fine. But most of the time, the focal point has to be near the center. If there's two people, you space them out, whatever. Okay, there were so many shots where someone would be so far left or right, and they're the focal point, that I thought someone was going to walk into the shot, and they don't, and then it cuts away. Or like the person talking is like in the upper right-hand corner. You're not in a Wes Anderson movie. This is Warcraft. Center your damn camera shots and show us what we're focusing on. It was so awkward in like so many different scenes where it was just like all over the place with where it was pointed. There
were a lot of strange cinematography and editing choices in the movie for sure.
Yeah, it was.
They were very jarring.
It was very like atrocious at times.
So again, to kind of sum up.
Oh, and they also stole like the Lord of the Rings, like the bum bum. Bum bum.
So
and like the end credits.
The orc theme song from Lord of the Rings, like the song of the Uruk-hai, sounds like the end credits of this movie sound so much like the Uruk-hai theme. So to sum up, obviously we didn't have a high opinion of this movie.
Nope.
My personal assessment is it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. It tells a story. I will give it that. It goes from point A to point B to point C. It has an arc. There's almost no character development. So it's very hard, for me, it's very hard to be engaged by the story. I'm sure people that play the games already know who these characters are,
Right.
but the movie gives you just nothing to go off of
Well,
as
it was
far
kinda-
as the personalities of these people.
Yeah, and it was kind of cool to see what they were building. The portal that the orcs build is the portal that's on the main menu of World of Warcraft, and that was kind of neat.
Yeah, it's
but
the portal
some of the stuff
there
I didn't
the
recognize.
right where the orcs come through. They leave their world and enter the human world. And again, I think there was a lot of interesting concept in this movie. Even though I don't like it 100%, I can respect the fact that they just dove into the visual style of the games. Like, I get all that. Just overall, if you don't care about the characters, it's very hard to care about the story.
Right.
And I think that's where this movie ultimately fails. It's certainly not the worst thing I've ever seen. Like, it's leaps and bounds over like Batman v Superman, for instance.
Right.
It's awkward, and there's definitely some weird filming choices, and the character development just isn't there. But it does tell a story, and it tells it coherently. I was actually surprised how much I think the average moviegoer could follow what was going on. As much stuff as they throw at you, they throw so much at you that I feel like it doesn't build the world effectively.
Right.
But I could understand what was going on, and I'll give the movie that.
Yeah, and I think I liked it less than you did, mostly because a lot of the technical aspects I really couldn't get around, as well as, like you said, the characters are super boring and dumb. And one of the big things you have to do with a movie like this that has weird names like Luthor and Duratan is you have to make them iconic characters. That way we can link, who's Duratan? Oh, he's that really awesome orc we saw earlier with like the weird battle scars, or he's got the child, or he's just a really badass character. We don't get that. We just get really long, weird names that is very difficult to stick to. And to be honest, if I could sum up this movie in one word, it's lame. Like, this movie is incredibly lame.
I agree.
The average film goer will probably not like this movie very much because they'll probably want to watch something more akin to Lord of the Rings or The Last Witch Hunter.
Wow, that's rough.
No, if they won't want to watch that, don't watch that.
But
or Game of Thrones. Like, there's a lot better medieval stuff that you could watch than this.
If the average moviegoer goes out of what I would call their comfort zone to dive into like a fantasy world, there's just better options.
Yeah. And for those of you that were kind of wondering it and people that were kind of crossing their fingers for it, this is not the video game movie you want. It's
right.
I don't know if I could say it's the best video game movie we have. It's definitely not the worst. Uwe Boll holds that record quite strongly. I would still probably think I like Silent Hill more than this.
Yeah, I think Silent Hill is probably, and Silent Hill is not an amazing movie by any means, but I think it does the best job of adapting its source material into a watchable film.
While making it still available for people who have no idea what Silent Hill is.
Yeah, I would probably put this like right behind Silent Hill as far as video game adaptations. Even if you know nothing about the games, even though you can't get invested in the characters really, you can still understand the story.
Right.
And that, to me, it's surprising, to say the least.
Yeah. And they come up with their approach that I think is the only way that you could honestly get a video game movie to work is setting it in the world of the video game, not making it the story of the video game, because every movie that's tried that has failed. And we'll see how Assassin's Creed pans out later on, and I imagine we'll eventually, down the line, talk about video game movies more in depth. But I think this one came at it with a good idea. It just really misses the mark, and it falls very short.
Yeah, ultimately, it does not get us invested in the people in the movie, and that is to its detriment. It kind of reminds me of a movie like, this is going way back, but a movie like Krull, or a movie like we had a lot of like generic 80s and 90s like sword and sorcery movies.
Right, like D&D and...
Yeah, where like we don't really get any development of character whatsoever, but we get this like adventure movie that you can follow along.
Right.
That's kind of where I put this movie. I put it in kind of that camp of, it's just kind of a big dumb movie that has some action, has some fighting, and that's what it is. It's a big dumb movie. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but it's certainly not going to win any awards.
Right. So there is one moment that we both laughed at, probably a little more than we should have, where Khadgar goes to the floating city and he like walks up to this like like circle, and it
It's like the council.
Yeah, it reminded me like Green Lantern with like the council.
Yes,
with
the Council of Oa. Yeah.
And like he walks up and they're all like, "Oh, who's this? Get him out of here! He's terrible!"
Right.
And he walks up, he's like, "Hold on, wait, this is happening, and the fellow's here, blah blah blah." And like the oldest one is just like, "What?"
Yes.
And I know it's supposed to be like a what? What do you mean? But it sounded more like a once more. What is that?
Right. What? I didn't hear you.
Right. Go back. You talked too quick. Everyone was yelling. I couldn't hear you.
That was really funny. Okay, so like we said, we're going to kind of use Warcraft to dovetail off into a discussion about world building in general. And
World of Warcraft building?
No, not that. And this movie, not so much in tone, but kind of in what it was trying to achieve, reminded me a little bit of the movie Watchmen. And I don't think Watchmen is a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination, but I think what Watchmen does really well, and especially within the first 15 minutes, is Watchmen gives you the world that this movie takes place in.
Yeah, it does it really well with it's a montage over the song Times They Are Changing by Bob Dylan.
Yes.
And it kind of shows like when the first Watchmen showed up, what they did, where they kind of had a downfall, what happened to them, why they don't exist anymore. And then the rebirth of the second group of the Watchmen. And like when we learn through dialogue through the film when they failed as well. Superheroes exist, but they don't work the way that we normally think they will. They're humans with flaws.
Right, and Watchmen kind of takes place in this world of like 80s world where Richard Nixon is in his fourth term.
Right, which is really funny.
Yeah, and we get shots of like newspapers that are kind of building backstory, and we get the shot of the famous World War II kiss of the sailor like dipping the woman, girl. And we get that with the lesbian female hero, and that montage does a really good job of, in just a few short minutes, kind of showing you, hey, this is our world, but it's an alternate version of our history.
Yeah.
And we have these heroes in it, and it really does a good job of setting that up. And the movie kind of plays out in its tone, kind of like a graphic novel or a comic book type of thing. And again, Watchmen is not perfect, but what it does a really good job of is setting up, hey, this is the world that this movie takes place in.
Right. Does a really good job of doing it.
Yeah.
And another one that I really like that kind of, we were talking about how this movie throws a ton of stuff at you really quickly and then kind of just jumps into the plot and you don't have time to process everything. A movie that throws a lot of things at you really quickly, but I think does a really good job of explaining it, is iRobot. iRobot shows, there's robots, they do stuff, they're incorporated in life, there's new updated robots, here's a giant building, the cars are automatic, and it's like throwing all this information at you, but then it has a couple like slow bits construed after that where you get to process things and you get to fully understand like, okay, this is, I think it's San Francisco, it's in the future, not too future, but robotics exists, there's this, and you get time to process it before they kickstart the plot. And this movie could have seriously benefited from someone just pulling up a stop sign and saying, hold up a sec, let's let everyone understand this, let's let people understand who the characters are, what the city is, where the city is, what we're doing, how our politics, is the economy good, is there an election coming up, like we need to know all these things before you just jump right into things, because then we don't care about anyone or anything.
Right, and you talking about iRobot reminds me of another movie we've talked about before, which is Minority Report, where, the first 10 minutes of that movie is, we set up, okay, there's this police force, and they can predict crimes that will happen in the future, and then they try to stop those crimes before they happen. So we're given kind of one element, and that element is, hey, there's this machine, and it allows the police force to detect crime, and we're given like this setup scene so that the audience understands what's going on. Right. Or take Inception, like the world of Inception, dreams within dreams. Like it's very, very complicated, but we get that opening scene where it's revealed not only through exposition, but through visuals. Hey, this is how everything works. Right. Like in Warcraft, we have things like, we have like griffins flying around.
Right.
And
giant warg wolves.
Yeah. But that's okay. Like I think the griffin thing is okay because it's like, all right, he gets on a griffin and the griffin flies off. Got it. I think it would have been a little better if they would have, again, kind of like let shots linger a bit more where like we see the griffin like flying. Again, there's a lot of quick editing.
He calls it down or something and we get like a majestic shot of it.
That's what majestic is the exact word I was going for.
Because it's a griffin. Like we should be like awed by it.
Right. If you're going to have this griffin flying around, let that shot play for a minute and let the audience kind of drink in, like, this is a griffin, like, this is a flying beast that's not of, our world.
Right.
Like, let them take that in a little bit. And that's what, Inception, or that's what Minority Report or iRobot kind of gives you the chance to do. Is it's like, hey, I know this is something really different, but let me kind of allow the audience to build their understanding of what's going on.
Right.
Or what you do, again, especially when it comes to like fantasy worlds where you have all these different names and this different world and all these different kingdoms and places and monsters and that sort of thing. Another really good strategy, which is employed by both Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, arguably the two most successful fantasy, television / film franchises out there.
Right.
You start really small. With Lord of the Rings, we do get the opening montage with Sauron and how the ring came to be and that sort of thing.
Right.
But right after that, we start with, here's Frodo. He lives in the Shire. He's a hobbit. Hobbits are simple people. Yep. Here's his friends. Here's Gandalf. They're going to go on a journey. And
it's very contained.
Yeah, and the audience is going to go on a journey with them. The characters in that movie, they've never seen the outside world. They've really never left the Shire.
Right.
So when the audience leaves the Shire with them, we're being exposed to the world in the same way that the characters are being exposed to the world. Through their eyes, we learn more about Middle-earth. We learn more about this world. And the world is being built before us just as the world is being built before the characters.
Right.
Or Game of Thrones, we basically, after a montage where we get to see the men of the Night's Watch beyond the wall, we start with Eddard Stark. And here's Eddard Stark's family. And he lives in Winterfell.
Right.
And we don't really leave Winterfell very much in that first episode. King Robert arrives with his family. We get introduced to him. And now the journey begins where, okay, Eddard is going to travel to King's Landing. So again, with our basically main character, we're going to travel through this world in the same way that he is. He's been in Winterfell for years and years and years. He's familiar with the outside world, but again, we as the audience get to see the journey through his eyes, and our understanding of the world expands because of that.
Right, and we also get to see it through his daughters Sansa and Arya's eyes as well, who they've never left the walls of Winterfell.
Right, we get to see it through lots of different characters, and obviously, Jon Snow goes to the wall and joins the Night's Watch, and we get characters here and there, and in the first season, the Starks are basically our point of view characters, and then as we move into seasons 2 and 3, especially 4 and 5 and so on, our point of view characters expand and we get to see more of this world. Right. But it's not like the show from the, they have probably 30 characters introduced in the first episode, and there's a lot going on, but they don't try to say, hey, this is Winterfell, and this is King's Landing, and this is Dorne, and this is Highgarden, and this is... and they have and and they there's a lot going on in the world, but Game of Thrones, I would argue, is probably a television show that probably has the most characters and plot lines and things running concurrently.
But you can distinguish between them.
Exactly, because
you ask some of the most diehard fans, they can name 20, 30, 40 characters like real easily. Yeah. They're not even digging that deep into the story to find them.
Right, and I know a lot of people who watch Game of Thrones who can't name all the characters, but what the show has done is it has a distinct visual style for all of the different places. Like, in that first season, when you're in Winterfell, like everything is drab and dreary and it's gray and like, cause it's up north. But then when you go over to Essos with Daenerys, like everything is vibrant and everything is, has this red tint because they go to the desert and with
kind of barbaric.
Yeah, it has this very like Conan the Barbarian feel to it. And then you go to King's Landing and it's this very regal. Pristine. Yeah. So all of the different locations have their own kind of visual cues as to what's going on. And all of the characters have distinct personalities. In the very first episode, you're introduced to Ned Stark and his wife and all of his children, and you have to distinguish between Arya and Sansa and Robb and Bran and Rickon and Jon Snow and
Theon Greyjoy
and
even is
Theon, and who you just not to mention all that's just one family. Like you're given a whole bunch of information, but everyone has a distinct personality and it has a distinct look, and you as the audience, even if you can't name all of those characters, you understand the essence of what's going on. And that's something that's kind of sorely lacking from something like Warcraft, where you understand the overall story, but you don't really have the motivations, the personalities of individual characters.
Right.
So it's very difficult to become invested in what's going on.
Yeah, and very much to play off the personality thing, there's also a way to do world building where you don't explain anything.
Hmm.
Like the first Star Wars. There is very, very little explained in that. Like, we go to the cantina in Mos Eisley, and there's tons of different species in there, and we don't know who they are, we don't know where the planet they come from, we don't know if they're good or bad, or if they're here visiting, or if they're bounty hunter, or what. We don't know anything about them. It's just, it's shown. And it's the idea that it's alien, and it's alien to you, and it's alien to Luke, and that's the cool thing. And the reason why those films strive so well without explaining anything is you get really connected to Luke and Han and Leia and Ben and like all these characters, and you really want to see them succeed. You don't need to know the world around it. It just kind of comes into view the more the story goes on.
Yeah, and to that point, so two things. The cantina scene specifically, like, yeah, you get introduced to all these different aliens, and like you said, it's not explained, but it doesn't need to be explicitly explained because number one, all of those aliens are not integral to the plot that's going on.
Right.
You don't need to be invested in their characters. And number two, it's a cantina in a spaceport. It makes sense that all these aliens are here. So there is a story reason and there is a world reason why you have this congregation of characters. And we as the audience watching that movie innately understand that. It's a bar. There's going to be a lot of different people. And we're in a universe where we've already seen Tusken Raiders and we've seen people and we've seen Jawas.
Yep.
The film has set us up to understand that this is a world, this is a universe rather, where there are all these different creatures, and it doesn't need to be explicitly explained because we get it. Like,
Yeah.
we understand that. I would even argue that in Warcraft, we get introduced to the elves and the night elves and the dwarves and that sort of thing, and they're not a main focal point, but the movie has done at least a good enough job of showing us, look, this is a fantasy world. Like, again, there's griffins riding around. Okay, there's dwarves and there's elves. I get that. Like, I, as a moviegoer, can accept that, and I don't need it explicitly explained to me.
Right.
But by contrast, we have Khadgar, who's like, oh, I was in this order of wizards, but I quit, but I renounced my vows, but I still have my powers, and like, it's a lot of tell, don't show.
Yeah.
Like, we don't see him leave. We don't get introduced to his
Well,
character until Lothar is like choking him and is like, what's going on, spell chucker, and it's like, you got to give us a little bit.
Yeah.
We again, there has to be enough for us to care.
Well, even his backstory is glanced over.
Right.
I was sold when I was 6 years old, and then I ran away.
That's it. Like,
that's his backstory.
He has maybe, and I wish I was exaggerating, but I'm not. He has maybe 20 seconds of backstory and character development in the entire movie. It's rough. Going back to your point about Star Wars, Luke, Leia, Han, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Luke is the hero who leaves home.
Right.
He comes from a farm. He comes from simple beginnings and has to go on this great adventure. And Obi-Wan Kenobi is the wise old mentor. And Leia is this princess, but she's also kind of tough as nails. And like, Lucas pulled these archetypes from classic storytelling, but gave them these unique personalities.
A fresh twist on them.
Yeah, and so again, we as the audience identify with these people and we care about what's happening to them. I mean, A New Hope spends 40 minutes before Luke and Obi-Wan even get to the cantina and we meet Han Solo. Like, we're with that character. We see his struggles on the farm. We see that he has aspirations with the great scene with the two sons and the music crescendos.
Yeah, he doesn't go, oh man, shucks, I wish I could go join the military. I would do so good with that.
We get that scene where Luke, he's a teenager and he's like, I want to join the academy this year, and his uncle's like, nope, I have to have you stay on, and like,
because of
we need more help,
harvest and everything.
Yeah, and so we get to see, okay, Luke has aspirations to do something else, and then he meets Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan tells him about his father, and Luke is like, that sounds great, but I can't do that. I have work to do. That's your uncle talking. And then his uncle and aunt get killed by the Empire. Now he has a reason to fight against the Empire even more so than he did before. He didn't like the Empire before, but now it's personal. And like, we get all of this. We totally give a shit about what happens to Luke.
Well, and we even start to care about Obi-Wan, who explains his past and explains that, like, I had a friend and he fell to the dark, and I knew your father. Your father was a great pilot, and he was a good friend. And, he's kind of explaining, and you see in his face, because of course Alec Guinness is amazing, you see in his face and his acting that he's really enjoying these cherished moments that he's looking back at. But when he starts to talk about Vader, he kind of like, it fades, and you're kind of picking up on things. And that's why when, spoiler alert for a 50-year-old movie, when he's killed towards
40-year-old movie.
40-year-old movie, when he's killed towards like the 2/3 mark, it still hits you. Like, sure, he's not Luke, so we're not incredibly invested in him, but we're still invested enough that Luke's lost his mentor. Now he's in this galaxy alone. He doesn't have someone to lead him. He doesn't have the Jedi to show him the ways of the Force or the way of the lightsaber. He's on his own now, and that's so well done.
Yeah,
it's not hit over your head. Like, he's just dead now, like the sun is in Warcraft. The sun's just killed, and that's it. Period. Who cares?
Right. And it's just, again, we're given no time. The Warcraft movie, it kind of suffers, I think, from there's not really a main character. Like, I guess you could argue that Duratan is the main character, but he's only
split between him and Lothar.
Yeah, but Lothar is not. He has no personality. Is the actor playing? I don't know if it's the actor playing him or just the choice that they made with the script, but like just zero charisma,
right.
Like nothing going on.
He's kind of blank faces everything,
and it's so hard to give a crap about him.
I mean, even when his like emotional scene where he's talking about his son being gone, he's like, "I blamed my son for my wife's death."
That was so awkward. Yeah, he gets drunk after his son dies, and then when Half-Orc Lady comes up to him, he's like, "For years, I blame my son for my wife's death because she died during childbirth. I'm not going to blame you." Then immediately glossed over. Like,
right, he's fine now.
That's something interesting. Like, give us a scene. Give us that scene from Quantum of Solace where James Bond is sitting there drinking himself to death. He's at 6 of the martinis or whatever, and he's like, "I can't sleep anymore, and I drink because I remember." And like, you get that moment where it's like, okay, I get why this character feels the way that he does. And in Warcraft, it's like, oh yeah, I blamed him for his mother's death for 6 years or whatever. Well, that's nothing. Like, just build on that. Like, give us something. You gotta give us something to latch onto and care about.
It is an emotional peg.
Yes.
This movie, and it's so underwhelming. They might as well just not put it in there. Because then, we joked about this earlier, it goes into that creepy, like, "I'm going to make out with you now while we're talking about your son's death."
Yes, it's just, again, awkward editing and pacing. Just some really, really cool ideas and some really interesting things that they could have done. Just really squandered in what ends up just being like this really mediocre mess of a plot.
Right.
Ugh. So ultimately, I guess the lesson that we're going with today is that when it comes to building a world, it's really important to have characters who the audience can care about that populate the world.
Right, or make the world interesting enough that the characters just kind of fit in with it, and it works with the story.
Your character doesn't even necessarily have to be likable. Like, look at a character like Peter Baelish, Littlefinger,
or Will Smith's character in iRobot.
Yeah, like, they don't have to be particularly likable, or the audience doesn't necessarily have to particularly feel for them, but they have to be interesting enough, or they have to be cared about enough to where the characters populating your world make your world worth being in.
Right.
And ultimately, I feel like Warcraft doesn't achieve that.
Right. Especially because it's a movie where, with Lord of the Rings and with Star Wars, the biggest thing that fans always talk about, which you can see through cosplay, is they make you want to be part of that world. You want to get sucked into it and, like,
right,
be, part of Middle Earth or part of, like, Hoth or, like, anything in Star Wars. And this is a movie that could have really done that.
Right. And an example that we've used before, Batman.
Right.
What makes Gotham City interesting? The characters it is populated by.
Right.
We have Batman, and we have the Joker, and we have Commissioner Gordon, and we have the entire Rogues
family.
Yeah, we have this cast of interesting characters. The only reason that Batman has been so incredibly successful across all media is because the character of Batman and the characters surrounding Batman that populate Gotham City and the world of Batman at large are incredibly interesting, and they're a gold mine that you can dig all of this depth and storytelling out of. That's why it's so popular, and that's why it's lasted for so long, because in Gotham City, we have this limitless number of people that audiences can be interested in and care about and be concerned about and love and hate and everything in between. And that's what makes Gotham so great. That's what makes the world of Batman so great. You can care and you can be invested in the people that are populating the world.
Right. The biggest thing about Warcraft is Warcraft already had that done for them through World of Warcraft and the Warcraft games. People already are invested in this world enough. But the film's so lackluster that, I mean, diehard Warcraft fans are probably going to like it.
Yeah, for
They're
sure.
probably going to give it a pass. But to people who just casually play, or some people who maybe get back into it later on, it's going to kind of look like a black mark on it, where the games are so, you're so invested in them, and you're so, like, you want to join the Horde, you want to join the Alliance. But in this, you don't give a shit about the Horde or the Alliance. Both suck. They're neither one, like, are at all identifiable compared to what they are in the games.
Yeah.
I mean, I made the joke that the cinematics are more interesting. The cinematics tell better stories. Like, Lich King's cinematics tell better stories than this. Even the Mists of Pandaria, which is played 100% for jokes, its cinematic is better than all of this. You had, like, a golden opportunity to create this beautiful, submersive world that we could really get into, and you kind of blew it.
Yeah, the word that you used was lame, and I agree, and I think the word that I would use to describe it is bland.
Yes.
Like, at the end of the day, there's just not a lot of interesting stuff going on. And
that's really it.
I think that's the biggest sin the movie commits, is that it's clearly made with the lore in mind. You know, the people that made this movie were interested in the lore of Warcraft and getting the world right. They just didn't bother to make it very interesting along the way.
Right.
That ultimately results in a bland film that I truly feel like the majority of audiences just won't enjoy, won't flock to.
Right, and that's just how it is.
So that was our discussion on Warcraft, the movie, and the concept of world building.
Right, which we could have easily gone way into on its own, but this film very poorly demonstrated it, so it was a great...
Yeah, it felt like a really good opportunity
Yeah.
to kind of tie in the topic, along with kind of giving our 2 cents on what we thought. So what did you think of Warcraft, the movie? You can contact the show in a number of different places. We're available on Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, and YouTube, all at POP RANT RADIO. If you are listening on iTunes, please give the show a rating and a review. It helps us out a lot.
And subscribe.
And as always, thank you, Major, for the theme songs.
Thank you, sir.
You are the man, and you will continue to be the man.
Yep.
As always. That was just for you. So thanks everyone for listening, and I just want to say we got a lot of really good feedback on the last episode, the Batman Beyond episode.
Yeah.
We had a lot of shares on social media, a lot of likes and comments and things, and that, honestly guys, that really means a lot to us. It lets us know that you're listening and you're enjoying the content.
Yeah.
I know that Eric and I had a lot of fun doing that episode.
And revisiting it.
Yeah, as we do all episodes, but Batman Beyond, like we mentioned last week, was something that was really special to us and we knew we wanted to do. So we're really, really happy that you all enjoyed it, and we hope that we can continue bringing you stuff that you like and that we like to talk about.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
So thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next week.
All right, guys. Bye.